I know there's a question later on like loudness, but usually I aim for around like -5 to -8. That's kind of like my go-to standard. But I don't know. Like with the loudness war going on right now, everybody's pushing for like crazy loud.
Yo.
So it's not something new, but yeah, personally, I like to retain some dynamic range in my music and my mixes. So I don't understand the -1 phenomenon right now.
Before I go, I do have a question for you guys. Like, has like life been absolutely ruined for you guys? Because when you hear just like the littlest little distortion in music, you just can't even.
I honestly like the way that I listen to music nowadays is like completely different. Like sometimes I not even enjoy the music anymore. I'm just like listening to every detail in the
Oh
mix.
my goodness.
Like, it's crazy. How is it for you?
I don't know. I feel like definitely if I'm mixing a song, I can switch on my engineering like personality and just listen to like the technical aspects of it. But I can still like enjoy a good concert if I go to like a bar. Like if the sound is not perfect, then so what? Like at the end of the day, music is there to evoke emotion. So like I can just like have a chat with my friends. I wouldn't be like, oh my god, like it's the 8K is poking out too much. Like I think I try not to be that. Like I mean, I try to live a sane life. So, but I could if I really pay attention. Obviously, I can point out all the inaccuracies and stuff like
Switch
that.
off the anal.
Yes, exactly.
Just switch that off.
Sometimes you need to just for your own mental health. You gotta switch that off sometimes.
Perfect. Okay, before we start, just one more show of hands. We were talking about -1, -3, -11. Raise your hand if you don't know what that means. Don't be shy. That's okay. If you don't know what that means, okay. Love. You think you know. I don't need to say loves because the people that know, they know, and the people don't know, they don't know. That's how it goes, right? Okay. So I wrote a Hot Ones intro for you guys. So we're gonna yeah. So we're gonna launch. All right. I'm a little nervous. I'm bad at reading.
This.
So,
Okay.
okay.
There was no.
Hey everyone, we're here at Learning.
One more time.
Hey everyone, we're here at the Learning Corner. I'm Yuzu, and today we're joined by RANIERE, VARON, and Brett LIN. Rani was an electrical engineer by trade and has self-taught audio mixing and spent the past year working in an individual record label. He recently mixed a track featuring Mariah Carey and Luisa Sonza. He's had the privilege to learn under mixing engineer Phil Tan, whose credits include Mariah Carey, Rihanna, Coldplay, Usher, and New Jeans. Rani blends clarity and emotional storytelling into his mix, crafting an immersive experience for every listener. Beside him, with 6 years of in the music industry, Brett is an audio engineer who's made mixes for Nelly Furtado, Realist K, and Leon Taro, to name a few. He brings a meticulous ear and studio-grade polish to every session. In between projects, Brett writes and produces his own music, rooted in R&B and pop. Yeah. He also worked on post-production for audiobooks and podcasts. Brett blends technical precision with creative intuition to bring tracks to life. Brett and Rani, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
All right.
That was a ChatGPT bio, by the way.
It was? Okay.
It's probably why it's hard to read off. Like, it's probably hard to roll off the tongue. It was ChatGPT.
I actually tried to clean it up a little bit, so this is actually shorter. I cut off a few names and
okay,
stuff,
okay.
so, like, we already went too long. Anyways, y'all are probably already bored. Okay, so there's still a few, like we asked earlier, but there's a few people that aren't too familiar with mixing and mastering. So could you tell us a little bit more about what is mixing, what is mastering, and why we need these two things?
Good question. Okay, I would say, mixing and mastering. So mixing essentially, if you picture, if Photoshop, if you bring like music and you put it next to like photo editing, I would say mixing is more like the actual Photoshop, right? Like you can actually go in there and fine tune like the contrast, brightness, and whatnot. And you can actually do like a lot of like tuning with like the background, like how you want your person to look and stuff like that. So it gives you a lot more like refinement, whereas mastering is just kind of like putting on that final sheen of like filter, whatever. And that's how I would kind of like contextualize it. I don't know.
When it comes to mixing for me, it's where I try to bring the vision and the emotion from the producers and the artists and give the direction for the listener to pretty much like listen to this instrument in this precise part, because that's where the artist and the producer believed the intention was from the music. So it's always looking for moments to translate the vision from the artist and the producer.
Okay, what about something more on the technical end for the people
Yes.
that are nerds out there? What does
Yes.
mixing and what does the mastering mean from an engineer's perspective?
100%. I
Yeah.
realize like my answer was probably way too it's like a bad analogy if people don't actually understand what mixing mastering is. So essentially, mixing is like if you obviously a song has different instruments, right? Different audio tracks, different stems. Essentially, you're finding a balance of all instruments so then each of them can fit in its own pocket. And then you get the decision, you get the freedom to decide what element should stand out, depending on the genre, depending on your vision. And it's essentially just turning up or down volume, right? EQ, you're basically turning up volume. You're turning up volume in a particular frequency range, or you're turning it down. Compression, right? You're equalizing, normalizing the dynamic range. It's all just like really crafting the soundscape of your music, so then it is you achieve balance with your music.
In that same line, it's always super important. We place the I feel like the stage of the music in terms of like width, height, and depth, and you use all these tools: equalizers, compressors, limiters, clippers. All of these tools are just tools to help us to achieve the vision of the producer. So we're always thinking about fitting every piece of the puzzle together to make sense.
Okay, that makes sense. So earlier you were talking about how it's similar to like taking photos. You have the photo itself,
Yeah.
and then you do the mix, which
Yep.
is you add a little bit of the small changes, and
Yeah.
then you did master, which is the final layer. So in photography, there's this idea that you want to start with a good photo to begin with.
Right.
So what about from the audio perspective? How important is it to start with a good sound? And how is it important to start with a good mix before you start mastering? Also, before you answer, I think let's just take turns answering instead of like each answering just for the sake of time. I think that makes it a little bit cleaner. Yeah, and if you have a particular answer to add in, just chime. Yeah, let's go.
Sure. I feel like extremely important. Like what I do in the mixing, it's completely dependent on how good the song is. First of all, if the song it's not happening, I'm gonna waste a lot of time just like fixing things before even get to the creative side of mixing and putting everything together. And the mindset, it's like record like there is no mixing and mix that like there is no mastering. So every stage of the music production creation is the best possible at every stage. The production, I'm gonna get the best I could possibly can from the production. Then I'm gonna get the best result I can from the mixing side. In the mastering is like the same thing. Instead of like trying to fix problems at every stage. So yeah.
So let's say someone does give you something with a bad sound or like a bad mix, and you're like, well, now I have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any particular tools that you use? Are there any particular techniques, or do you, like, at what point are you like, okay, that's the best I can do with this? Or do you actually ask them to like give me a new take?
Well, obviously it depends on like the clients and like the artists I work with. Like usually nowadays, like my artist, you know, they usually have a producer, and if I also like know them because like they would bring the producer into the session with like my mixing and stuff like that. If there's something wrong with the production, and you know I've worked with the producer like a long time, then I would actually reach out to the producer, be like, hey, listen, I know that this is what you guys agreed on in your whatever production sessions, but like this is from a mixing standpoint, it just won't work. Is there any way we can tweak? So a lot of times I would find myself talking to the producer a lot more just to kind of like find that alignment, so then we can both try to achieve the vision for the artist, right? But just going back to the previous question, I do think, yes, absolutely, nailing down the quality from the source is the most important thing you can ever do, right? I used to think I was bad when I first started mixing. I don't know if you guys noticed, but like a lot of like hip hop artists, they would just like download like a YouTube beat like into MP3, and then they would lay like vocals on top of it, and then they would send it to us mixing engineers and hoping that you know we would just turn it into like turn them into Drake or like Kendrick, whatever, right? And then for the longest time, I thought I was like not making any progress because what am I doing? Like, why is it still not sounding like, you know, these top artists? And then I realized it's because like I don't have the resources to work towards, right? Like it's just like one track, like a stereo track. How am I supposed to like, really fine tune it? So like once I start to like kind of, progress and advance in my career, and I started to work with like people who are more proficient, like proficient musicians, proficient producers, and then once I receive like good sounding stems and instrumentals, then like that's when I actually know how to like leverage and how to like really learn from my past mistakes and stuff like that. So it's vital to get good sounding sound from the get go.
Sound.
Yeah.
sound. It becomes not a word. Okay, so we talk about this idea of a good sound, right? Start from a good source, and we're gonna get into what makes a good mix a little bit later. But I'm curious, how would you explain what a good sound source is? Like, or what makes something hard to work with to mix?
For me, like the biggest problem that I have nowadays is like vocals. For example, some artists, especially if they don't have like much experience, they might not know how the distance that they should be like keeping from the mic. So in a session, they might record like super close. So now we have like the proximity effect. So they get a lot more low end to the vocals, which is hard to control in a mix. And like one thing that I personally like have to do most of the times when I get like bad vocals is literally go word by word and clip gain everything and use EQ to every single word that I don't think is like, oh, that should have been recorded like a little better, but it's not, so I'm gonna have to fix it. So it gets to that point of like fixing every single word just to make sure the material that I'm working, it's good.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of words, in case you don't know. There's a lot of words in music, so especially pop, if you're working in pop. Actually, Rennie, you mostly work in pop, or what genres do you mostly work in?
Pop and urban music, like rap, drill, R&B, Brazilian funk. That's what I've been doing lately. Yeah,
that makes sense. And I know, Brett, you produce your own pop and R&B, but what about what do you mix and what do you master?
I would say definitely hip hop, pop artists, R&B, and starting to get into EDM, like a few tracks. But I would say EDM is definitely still a little bit like kind of like a new space for me. But I would say hip hop, pop, R&B. I'm very familiar with those genres.
So I'm curious because we have a mostly EDM scene.
Right.
This is an EDM collective.
Yes.
How different is it to do EDM? I know y'all have like a certain amount of experience, but how different has it been working with EDM versus like pop, R&B, or other more acoustic sounding genres?
I would say definitely different because, and I'm not really technical with like the subgenres of EDM, but like obviously I think my general sense of EDM is like there's less vocal element to it. It's more so like it's more instrumental, right? So it's like kind of like the biggest thing of mixing is like finding that that focal point, like what is driving the song, right? So for pop, if it's just like or a ballad, right? If it's just like a piano track and vocals, it's most of the time is like that the rawness of vocals. So you want to focus on what that star is in your track. And for EDM, I feel like it's like it's like it's the groove, it's the synths, it's like the drum and bass. It's less about like vocals. So when you sit down and mix an EDM track, you gotta get into that mindset of like, okay, if I'm picturing myself at a festival in a club, what would I pay attention to, and then how do I make sure I can highlight that element? So in that sense, I would say definitely when I sit down and mix different genres, it would be me picturing myself in the audience space and be like, okay, what would these people, music like EDM fans, pay attention to when they listen to this music? So, yeah,
that makes sense. So, going to the actual mixing stage, how do you go about starting a mix when you get all the stems from an artist and whatnot, or even if you're mixing or mastering your own music? How do you start?
First of all, is to get the gain stage right. I always started with my gain stage. So my gain stage is gonna make sure I'm always having a healthy signal to every bus that I have on my template on my mixing session.
Can you quickly explain gain staging?
Gain staging?
Yes, for the people that don't know.
Sure. Gain stage is pretty much like making sure I have like again like a health signal going to all my plugins, all my buses, my mix bus. It's having like multiple stages of control of the signal and controls as well. I have like VCAs on my template, so I can manipulate all the buses, all the groups individually or by groups. So I have like not only like the sound, but also like the visual. How hard am I hitting my meters on every single buses that I have? So that's pretty much like what is like gain staging. And once my gain stage is right, I always start first of all with my mix bus. My mix bus is where I get the sense of the tone of balance of the song, and it varies song by song, but it usually involves EQ, compression, saturation, clippers most of the times, and limiters. And so yeah, once I get the tone of balance of a mix of the mix bus, I usually start with drums and bass. I try to get the balance of my low end right, and then I go for the rest of the mix.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Brett, what about the mastering side of things? How do you go about starting a master?
How do I go about starting a master?
Yeah, you've just received a decent mix. let's
Right.
say. Yeah.
Well, I like to listen to the song, whether it's like me mastering a track or like me mixing a track. It's like me sitting down and actually play that song a couple times without really like just having any like judgment or like, oh, like that's like not right or whatever. Just kind of sit with it and then feel what needs to be like what kind of again, like I know I'm kind of reiterating on this like emotion thing, but like, at the end of the day, music is supposed to evoke emotion. So like when I'm sitting down, I listen to it without judgment, like what am I feeling? And then once I can establish like a baseline feeling, and then what can I improve on? Like what's missing? And again, obviously it depends case by case, song by song, but it's really like sitting down and like immerse yourself in the music without too much technical judgment, and like just understand the music from its core, and then start piecing stuff together and start to do wear your technical hat and start fine tuning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's lean into that a little bit, because there is this idea that music is emotion.
Yep.
Music can be technical.
Yep.
And it is technical, but at the same time, if it's emotionally driving, that's what's most important.
100%.
So I'm not sure how to phrase this question, but like, if you worked on a track and you're like, this technically isn't right, but it sounds good, or have you guys had that kind of experience before?
I mean, like, honestly, I feel like at this, when I first started, I was like, oh my God, everything has to be perfect, right? I feel like a lot of us are like perfectionists. This is not right. This is muddy. This is whatever. But like kind of throughout my years, I've been doing this like 6 years, not like crazy long, but like I feel like I've kind of gone to a point where like I've seen songs that are not mixed properly that gone on to do amazingly well, right? Because they resonate with people. Now, in that sense, a lot of the times, it also kind of like, we are technical by nature, but then at the same time, we need to understand, like, you know, at the end of the day, it's an art form. So there's only so much we can try to make it technical, but at the same time, we should leverage our technical expertise to really elevate the emotional elements of the song instead of just trying to make it completely technical. If you approach it purely from a technical standpoint, you're gonna lose emotion. You're gonna think that, oh, I made sure the compression is hitting just perfectly right. I made sure I EQ the shit out of the vocal so it's like sounding exactly how I want it. But if the artist comes back and be like, it's just like missing something, then you just wasted all your time because you thought you were doing something that's good for yourself, but like you're not really thinking about it from a artistic standpoint. So I've now learned to just embrace the imperfections, because it might be imperfect to you, but it might not be imperfect to everybody else, honestly.
Absolutely. So with that, how do you know when a track is done, a mix? So you worked on it, you're like, okay, this feels like I'm ready to send it to my client. It's not what your client is feeling it's done, it's when do you feel like it's done?
That's a good question. I don't think the feeling of like, oh my God, I think this mix is like perfect. and it's done. I don't think that feeling ever like happened to me, but it gets to a level of like I'm comfortable enough of like I'm feeling the groove of the song. The song is grooving. There is movement. There is like contrast. There is like this. The scenes are changing. So that's when I usually feel like, okay, that's like comfortable enough. Let me see what the producer or the artist has to say about this, and then we can go together from this point. Where I think it's like have like all these like what I envision for the song in terms of again like contrast, movement. When I get that done and get at a point of like I'm comfortable enough to show to the producer, and then we go together from that point.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So you get it good enough, and then you get the client. You start working with them more closely, and like
Exactly, like
Right.
collaboration.
yeah, that makes sense. And it is a collaboration, right?
Exactly.
So what about on the client side? Like, let's say you have client feedback. Maybe it's different from your vision and whatnot. How do you handle those situations? Is the client always right? Do you ever try to push back with the vision?
Somebody said this before. I don't know where I heard this from, but like, if you're a mixing engineer, your job, you're the bus driver, right? Your job is to steer people to the right direction. Now, if they might want to go take a different route, they want to go take a scenic route or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're trying to get to the destination. If you're trying to change a destination, you will never have a good client relationship. So if you feel strongly about something that's going to elevate the song, obviously communicate that with the artist and have a, constructive, productive conversation. But know that, your job is a collaborator. You shouldn't like put your ego, in front and be like, oh no, like this has to go that. Like I've met a lot of audio engineers who are just super egotistical. They're like, no, I'm right. I know all the technical terms. You got to listen to me. And then they end up not working with the artist. So like, what's the point of like really trying to fight that? So it's really that balancing act of like, how do you deal with people? How do you deal with artists? Make sure you can translate your vision, but at the same time, not, really trying to change where the artist is trying to go. Because you're just going to end up having frustrated clients and you're never going to get them back. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all about collaboration, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's go actually into producing for ourselves. So we have a lot of producers that also mix and master for themselves. There are some difficulties with mixing and mastering your own music. So can we speak on that? And also just to add 2-in-1, what about mixing with just headphones as opposed to using studio monitors and all that? Because money is hard, right?
When it comes to mixing on headphones, I believe it's totally possible. Nowadays, some of the pros that I know, they do mix on headphones, especially if they're traveling. They totally mix on headphones. So it's like totally possible. I find myself a little tricky when it comes to understand the stereo field on headphones, especially because when you pan hard left or hard right, is any sound on headphones, you're only gonna hear from one side, from one ears, which is totally different if you panning hard left or right from the speakers. You still listen from both of your ears. So I do find very tricky and hard to understand the stereo field when mixing on headphones. So for me, I always mix and start the mix with speakers, and I only use headphones to check how it's translating on headphones. So yeah, but it's totally possible.
What about just for producers to mix their own music?
I believe the creation of music, it's a very is a collaborative process. So, and I do believe if you work with somebody that specialize in one area, let's say a mixing engineer or a master engineer, it's only gonna be beneficial for the music, for your piece of art, to get the best of the mixing engineer and then the mastering engineer. Of course, nowadays, it's not possible for everybody to afford a mixing engineer and a mastering engineer. So you have to do it by yourself, but you have the chance and you have the opportunity to work with somebody else that is specialized in the area. It's always beneficial. You're gonna get great results.
Okay, yeah. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about loudness.
Okay.
And loudness it's a pretty big thing.
Okay.
I talked to you a little bit about this already, Brett.
Yes.
So to quickly explain, LUFS is what we describe loudness in. The higher the number, 0 is the loudest, and anything lower than that gets quieter. It's a perceived loudness. So my new song is -3 LUFS.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really loud. Dubstep artists are going for -3, -1.
Right.
Right? I actually want both of you to speak on this. I'm very curious because Spotify
Yes.
Normalizes you to -11 LUFS.
Yes.
Other platforms go to -16
14,
LUFS,
yeah.
14, whatever. Is there a point? Is there a reason why bass producers are doing this? How do you feel about all this?
And I want to preface this by saying it's ridiculous because I feel like maybe because I work more with pop songs and R&B songs, so I do feel like those genres need a little bit more dynamic range. Obviously EDM, it's kind of like a wall of sound, right? It's just everything is up front. So maybe I think it will work in a festival setting or in a club setting, but why is it happening right now? Honestly, I mean, this is the loudness war, right? I don't know when it started. Maybe 90s, 80s. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I wasn't born back then, but it started because people are just pushing it for either aesthetic purposes or to just compete with other songs on the platform, right? Because when you're submitting your songs to the artist and they're like, why? Okay, it sounds good, but why is this not hitting enough? People are artists don't really understand the technical idea of mixing and mastering. Oh my god, this is good, but it's just not bumping enough. It's not loud, so people just start to, deliver louder and louder and louder mixes and masters, and eventually it becomes a competition. Okay, if your mixes or if your master is quieter than other people's master, you're kind of automatically perceived as a more inexperienced mastering engineer or mixing engineer, which creates this whole kind of loudness war. And this is actually an actual term that is being circulated in the industry. It's a loudness war thing. But yes, I mean, I personally, like I mentioned earlier, I mixed maybe max -5 LUFS, but usually if I'm mixing a song with vocals in it, usually -6 to -8, so I can retain some kind of dynamic range, retain some kind of depth to the song, so that it's kind of more, it's more dynamic, as opposed to just having everything up front in your face, you're gonna blow your head up, kind of stuff. So yeah. That's my take.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm also not a huge fan of the loudness war. I don't understand, especially when it comes to electronic music, dubstep, -3, -1 LUFS. There is no dynamics. You lose all the transients. And I'm a huge fan of transients. That's what gives the impact. It's what gives the weight to a song. Is transients. When it's that loud, you lose everything. Again, there is no depth. There is no, pretty much no nothing. Just a brick wall hitting you all the time with sound. So, and also when it comes to Spotify normalization, -11, -14. For the new producers here, there is no need to master your songs for that specific target. That's just a standard created by a company that is no reason. Another thing is your song ideally is not going to be played only on Spotify, not only Apple Music. It's going to be played on radios, festivals. So you need to be, again, competitive. You need to be at the same standard as the other songs. And I guarantee none of the master engineers, the big guys are mastering, targeting whatever normalization the streaming platforms is doing. So there is no need. Just do whatever the music needs and it should be fine.
Okay, that makes sense. So I've actually heard that people do 2 masters, one for streaming platforms, another one to be played at clubs where maybe the streaming platform is a -11 or whatever, and then you do a different version which is -7 or -5 for playing your shows. Do you guys do that? Have you heard of that?
Me personally, no, because I don't have any artists who are playing at festivals, but I usually just deliver whatever the final loudness is. So again, -7, -5, it's gonna get turned down by Spotify anyways. But it's not losing dynamic range, right? Because if you're already at if it's already limited to a point where it's hitting -7, they're just turning it down. So it doesn't really affect the dynamic range at all. It's only if they like boost it, then they're basically climbing down the dynamic range. But if they're just turning it down, it's already being squashed, and they're just turning it down. So it doesn't really affect the dynamic range if it's being turned down. So
Right. So let me just clarify. So you're saying like when you mastered it to like -7 or -11, that's already, or -7, -5. It's like that's the dynamics that sounds good. So you're not losing dynamics even if it goes down to -11 because you like that amount of.
It's just the volume being turned down.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That is another like concept. It's like when it comes like to density, like harmonic density. If you mix one song, you have the song master at like -5, -6, but you also master a version specifically only for streaming platforms at -11. I guarantee the other one is gonna sound richer in terms of like harmonics. It's gonna be like, it's gonna have way more density, which also creates the we perceive as like louder and fuller in the frequency spectrum.
Right. That makes sense. So even though the platform drops it down -11, you're still aiming for the -5 or whatever harmonic density you're going for.
And I believe like the misconception that the people have nowadays, it comes from the Spotify. They were actually doing compression a few years ago, but they don't do that anymore. It's just like literally gain. There is no dynamic reduction on the streaming, or at least Spotify. I don't know about the other ones, but yeah.
Well, good for them. I'm glad we keep our dynamics. So on compression, actually, compression is a really interesting topic because it's really complicated. There's everything. So I'm curious, how long did it take for you guys to grasp compression? Do you feel like you got a good handle over it? What does compression mean to you?
It does take quite a lot of time to train your ears to hear compression and what compression is doing. But honestly, once like it's very easy to understand all the buttons from a compressor, attack, release, ratio, threshold. That's like the easiest part. But whenever you use compression, I feel like it needs to come from an idea. Like, what am I looking for to get from the compressor on the specific sound? Is it like, do I want to glue the sound? Do I want to make it like punchier, thicker? Like, it needs to come from like the intuition, like the idea needs to be there. Like, why am I going for compression? Because nowadays there is like many different ways to compress a sound without using compressors. So there is like limiters that are clippers. You can literally do it by hand on clip gain. So there is another thing. Compressor, it's not only controlling the dynamic range. A lot of us use compressors as a tonal box, because what the 1176 is gonna give me in terms of like colors, and when I say colors, I mean harmonic saturation, harmonic distortion. The 1176 is gonna give me something different from the Fairchild. That's gonna give me something different from the LHUA. They all have different colors, different flavors, and you need to be aware of these things. Like, if I put the Fairchild on a bass, like how that is gonna, you have to imagine, like, even before putting the compressor, how is the specific box gonna change my sound? Is it for the better? Is it for the worse? So we have to give this like shot of like trying all of them, just like try all of compressors at the same source and see what it's doing to the material. That's like the best thing I could ever possibly do to understand compression. You just like try all of them at the same source. What is it doing with the same gain reduction? What is the 1176 doing? What is the distressor doing? What is the LHUA doing? I guarantee they all gonna sound very different.
Yeah, that makes sense. So speaking of different plugins, you mentioned a bunch of compression plugins. Are there any plugins? So there's a lot of Ableton users here. Okay. I'm sure there's some FL Studio and some other. What are some external plugins that you like to use when you're mixing and mastering?
For compressors
for overall, everything for mixing and mastering.
Wow,
everything. Yeah.
like how many plugins am I gonna do? I hit top 3?
Which ones do you like? Yeah, let's go top 3, or like which ones can you not live without?
Okay.
Which ones are worth the money?
Which ones are worth the money? Okay. Great question. So many
Thanks,
options. I will say, okay, let's say EQ. I love Waves Factory's Spectre. Have you guys heard of it? Yeah. Love that because like you can basically it has mid-side. It has different kind of like modes that you can pick. Great EQ. Compressor, I would say LA2A. I love LA2A. I use the one from UAD. I would say UAD is a good starting point. I used to buy their because like they used to not have like the UAD Spark like the monthly subscription thing. So I would just buy. I bought like I spent so much money on UAD like back then, and then they changed their business model. So now it's like subscription based, and you pay $8 a month. But I already spent like almost $2,000 on UAD plugins in the past. So, but I think UAD does a really good emulation with their plugins. You know, in terms of like really sounding closer to like the actual analog hardware. I would say UAD is a good company. And then another one, I don't know if you guys heard of it. It's called Acoustica Audio. Love Acoustica Audio. Check it out. They're kind of pricier than UAD, but I would say they do amazing. They're so close to the actual analog hardware. So I recommend you guys check that company out. And then what else? Okay, I answered EQ, compressor. Reverb. Good question. Reverb. Gotta go with
you have one?
Lexicon 4ADL from UAD or Valhalla. Valhalla is great too. Valhalla vintage verb. You can never go wrong. $50, whatever. It's great.
Yeah.
For me, when it comes to EQ, my go-to is Fab Filter Pro Q. That's a go-to for me. Compressors, love LHUA. Yep. But I find myself using RComp from Waves most of the time. Easy to use, manipulate, everything is like super quick. SSL bus compressor, amazing on mix bus. I use that a lot, especially if I'm doing hip hop, rap. It works amazing. Reverbs, I love Valhalla, but I've been using a lot of Seven Heaven. They have an emulation from the Brewcasty, which is phenomenal. Like it's simply just so good. Delay, I love Echo Boy from Sound Toys and Valhalla Delay as well. Yep. They have an amazing delay. What else? I think that's it, right? And it's Spectre that he mentioned. It's amazing. If you have the chance, just like try the plugin because I've been using that for like quite a while now and it's everywhere on my mixes because it's that good.
Awesome. So let's open the floor up to the audience for some more questions. I'm sure there's things that they're dying to know that I didn't think about. So, yeah.
Actually, I do have one question.
Yep.
You mentioned a lot of like virtual plugins that you use in your process. Are there any like key pieces of analog hardware that you always use when you're mixing or mastering, or is it all virtual?
Well, so I have a home studio and I work at a studio called Orange Lounge as well. It's down by Queen and Bathurst. We have a ton of analog gears there. I've tried mastering a bunch there, but it's just like the recallability because every time when you take it back and you want to do revisions, you got to go back and remember your settings so you can, because like some other engineers might be using the gear so that they already like tweaked it and stuff like that. So like the recallability factor of using analog gears really making that whole process inefficient. So I have, come to terms with just mixing in the box, and a lot of like the best mixing engineers in the world, pop mixing engineers like Serban Genia or like Manny Maricon is kind of like, he's like hybrid, but like Serban Genia, for instance, like he mixes for like, who does he mix for? Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande and whatnot. He's completely in the box, and he's won like 50 Grammy awards in the past. So again, I'm not a purist. So if you have, no money to spend on analog hardwares like compressors and stuff like that, invest in good monitors, good sounding monitors. Get a good preamp, right? If you record, right, even for like listening for the ADDA conversion, it's great. So invest in like whatever UAD Apollo X is like a good standard, right? Or X4, X2, whatever. And then just get good sounding monitors. And then if you have extra extra money that you want to spend on hardware, then start looking into like what are you truly trying to achieve, and what would you like really use the most. If you really want to invest in like a good compressor, then just do a shootout, go to Long and McQuaid, rent out different compressors, and then do a quick comparison, and then see what's your best chain, I guess.
I'm fully in the box, so I never had any experience actually with any of the analog pizza gears, but from what I've heard from all of the pros, like Jason Joshua is one of my biggest inspirations, and he nowadays fully in the box.
Cool. Yes.
Yeah, you guys mentioned before that mixing is all about feeling and about emotion, and it's more like art than technical. But what happens when, let's say, you're mixing an album for an artist you really like, but there's some songs that you're not really connecting with, or you're not, like, you're not fully connecting with the song, so it's hard for you to like get into the zone and again like mix out of emotion. How do you approach that?
Great question. I think, obviously as mixing engineers, if you mix so many songs, on a monthly basis, you obviously won't connect with every song possible, right? In that case, I would say really try your best to first identify the genre, again, like what genre it is, right? And then what element in the song would you think would resonate the most with people, right? Really, like, so what I like to do when I approach a mix is like, okay, I would always have the vocals on no matter what I'm mixing. So kick and bass, I agree with Rennie earlier. Like, I do like to start with kick and bass, and then I'll have the vocals on, and then try to see what would stand out and what would complement the vocals the most, right? And then go from there. If you feel like, okay, I'm bopping to like the snare is hitting really nice, it's got this like kind of rustic whatever element, okay, then let's start there, solo that and solo the snare, and then maybe solo one melodic instrument, so you kind of get like the bare bones kind of like structure of the mix, and then really trying to highlight the pieces that would really get somebody to start bopping their heads, or like whatever, like get them to have a little bit more, just a little bit of emotions, right? Just find that element, and then just try your best to highlight and amplify that as much as possible, right? At the end of the day, if you can't connect with the song, you can't connect with the song. But like, do your best as a mixing engineer to clean up, to polish, and then to accentuate the key elements of the song. Is my advice.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. Come back to later.
Okay. Ekern.
Yeah, if I were to look for an audio engineer for a service, what kind of red flags should I look out for?
Sorry, say that again?
If I were to find an audio engineer to do my mixing, what are red flags that I should look out for?
Red flags?
Red flags.
Red flag.
Your song per dollar.
Yeah. To make my money's worth.
That's a good song, don't I?
What red flags to look out for, so you know whether or not the person is like an inexperienced mix engineer?
First thing, they should have examples to be able to do. And then they should be collaborative. They shouldn't be telling you what they know. They mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
To be collaborative.
Like egoistic,
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just hear stuff they've done. Like, if it's somebody who does country music, do you want them to do your drum and bass track? They need to be familiar with the genre too, right? And there's a certain price, like, price is so subjective.
yeah.
But if it's too good to be true, they're using ozone in chart. They're just slapping it up ozone on, right?
We love presets.
And I would say the easy way to also kind of gauge your mixing engineer's capabilities is just listen to like the artists that you listen to, like big name artists, right? And then compare that, and then you can very clearly tell whether or not the mixing engineer that you're going for is professional enough where like if you upload your song onto Spotify or whatever, whether or not that would sound close to like a professional song. You can easily, if somebody's just on like Fiverr and they're slapping an Ozone 9 onto it, you can tell. If you have the, most people would be able to tell, okay, that's not even like close to being like a professional sounding mix. Why is my vocals completely washed out with reverb, right? Amateurs, mixing engineers love slapping reverb on everything, right? So you can tell right away, okay, if that's super washed out without any purpose, then it's probably, them not knowing what they're doing, right? If all of a sudden like a certain instrument is poking out super, like a lot without any reason for it, then they're not really even thinking about like the balancing properly.
Yeah, maybe stay away from Fiverr.
Or you can find a good community and find a nice mixing engineer from the community. You know, we have two right here.
Another thing is like if they're not even considering your opinion as the producer and the artist. I feel I've seen a lot of other engineers that don't even want to hear what the producer or the artist is saying. They don't want to like consider a different opinion other than their own. So that's a red flag for me.
That makes sense. Yes, Stan.
I want to know, like, do you use reference tracks and how important are they in your process?
Absolutely. Super important. I always reference my track when I'm mixing because it's so easy for you to be tunnel vision when you're deep in a mix. You lose objectivity. No matter, I don't care how experienced you are, you will for sure lose objectivity. Always reference either, if they have a rough mix for you, like if the producer already sent you like their version of mix, then reference that because like that's the version that the artist and the producer agreed on in the session. And a lot of times, I don't know if you guys heard of this term demoitis, but like most artists will stick to the demo that they listen to in session, in studio. So no matter how much you want to change that, I've had so many times where I thought, okay, the rough mix is so bad, something is wrong. Like the whatever, this particular instrument is super loud. But in that instance, because the artist already approved that version in studio, they're aware that that's the kind of like soundscape, that's the balance they're going for. You can't change too much. So I always reference the rough mix that the producer sends me, or if they don't have a rough mix, then I will try to find similar genre on streaming platform and try to find that similar kind of like balance of like instruments and definitely I would always reference when I'm deep, let's say I'm like super focused in like on doing my, like crafting my mix. After 30 minutes, an hour, I'll take a quick break and then I'll come back and then I'll reference how does it compare to like the rough mix or some other songs online because it's very important.
Super important. What I do have a plugin that I absolutely love. It's called Metric AB. Yeah. From Plugin Alliance. It allows you to import, I believe, like 9 songs into the same plugin, so you can literally A/B to the reference or the rough mix. And things that I feel like it's important to listen to the reference track is not just like how loud this snare is from the reference track, how loud the vocal is, but the relationship between instruments. Pay attention to the relationship between drums and vocals, drums and bass, pianos and vocals, other than just like each individual instrument. So yeah.
So maybe this might be more applicable. Like I think maybe you produce your own songs.
I do produce, yeah.
So like, I guess like, what are your thoughts on like mixing while producing? Like when you're producing your tracks,
right?
You also start adding in like some mixing elements into it while you're producing your tracks, or do you think like what are your thoughts on that?
So if I'm basically doing my own production and mixing, whether or not I'm gonna mix while I go, I try not to, honestly. Obviously, if there's something drastically different than what I envision the final product to sound like, I will try my best to tweak and see whether or not I can tweak that in post. So I will kind of go in there and maybe EQing a little bit. Okay, is that closer to what I envision in my head? But if it's, let's say, like 60% there, and because with my, like, I know what I can achieve with mixing, then I just try to make sure that I get the production right and not care too much about, because like I that's why I don't like producing and mixing like myself as well. It's like I want to be able to, like, when I'm producing, just put on my producer hat and not worry too much about the technique. If I again keep bouncing back and forth about like my different like hats, I'm just gonna be like, it's not gonna be beneficial for the song because I'm thinking from a mixing engineer standpoint. But I'm a producer right now. I shouldn't be thinking about the soundscape, which is why when I'm producing, I try my best to at least even have, let's say if I'm still mixing the song, try to have the last, a person like, who can have another kind of like, opinion, like they can be like the mastering engineer or whatever, but like at least have somebody to give you some opinions, because like otherwise you're gonna be like super deep into it and you're gonna lose all objectivity. So I try my best not to, but if I do, then I try to just be a producer, and then once it gets to the point of mixing, then I'll wear my mixing engineer hat.
That makes sense. Kevin.
Like I downloaded like a track from my like favorite artist,
Yeah.
EDM artist, and when I like put it into Ableton, I see it like going to the red. And I've heard like people like when they use their limiters, they turn off or on true peak and like oversampling. Like what are your thoughts on that? Like, is that wrong, or is there like a
Clippers.
I usually keep my true peak on the limiter like on, only because of the conversion when it comes to analog. When you don't have the true peak, you might get some samples that is like going past 0 dB. So I usually always keep the true peak just to make sure nothing is going above 0. But honestly, like if you send in to master and you do send a file in 32 bits, you don't have even to worry about it, because there is like so much headroom on a 32-bit float file that it's not gonna sound. The distortion is not gonna be like heard, and then you just let the master engineer take care of it.
I'm gonna jump in a little bit on this one for a little bit of context. That's Ableton does do 32-bit into 24, and it has a soft clipper out of the box. Well, other DAWs, like they have whatever else they do, digital clipping. So Ableton does sound better when you're going to the red.
But another question on that, but if you like export it as like a 32-bit and then you upload it to your distributor, will they like apply a loudness penalty if you're like peaking?
Not that I'm aware. There is no penalty.
What do you? I don't know what loudness penalty means.
Like I like Googled it. It's like they, I don't know if it's like right or not, but like if you are clipping, like if you're going to the red and then like they recommend to like make sure your true peak doesn't go over 0.
Is that just a LUFS thing? Like going to negative 11 LUFS, or is that different?
No, I think he's talking about distortion. So the main thing to do is just make sure it's not clipping for all their reasons. But another thing a lot of people know about sending 24-bit 32 to your distributor, they're going to make it 4416. They all do. Unless you're sending it to Apple and it's Apple for the high-res stuff. A lot of people don't know that. Like all the distributors are going to make it 4416 anyway. Keep that 32 version, but
so they're going to recommend sending like the highest quality file to the distributor?
Usually, yes.
yeah.
What was the question, sir? What's the highest quality? I send my mixes.
Export settings when you upload.
I usually export in 4824 bit. But I agree, yeah. Like if you upload it to Spotify, but like yeah, different platforms are different. Their codec conversion, right? Like Spotify does it 4416, but like Sean was saying, like Apple has its own codec. Like nowadays they do accept if you want that little like loudness master badge or whatever. You know how like sometimes you have like Dolby Atmos badge, loudness master badge or whatever, Apple high res badge. You can do 99.6 kilohertz and like 32-bit float, and then you'll get that badge or whatever for Apple. Or like Tidal is different too, but yeah, I usually export my mixes if I'm sending to the mastering engineer in 4824, and if they want to do like dithering and whatever, they want to turn it down to 44.1 16-bit for whatever old school, because like that's how they used to like burn it onto CDs, right? That CDs would only take 44.1 kilohertz and like 16-bit. So that's why this like kind of like the tradition. But nowadays, honestly, if you're uploading onto streaming platform, I do it in 4824.
Amazing.
I don't do 32. I personally can't even hear the difference between 24 and 32-bit.
All right, we're running out on time, so this has been Brett and Rennie. Please, Rennie and Brett, if you have any releases, please let the crowd know. Do you have any releases coming out? Do you have anything you want to shout out?
Nothing for me personally. I'm a mixing engineer, so if you want to add me on Instagram at Brett Lin Music, feel free to add me and we can chat about mixing. If you have any questions, shoot me a message. I'm more than happy to help out. But
They'll be here all night too, so if you have any more questions.
yeah, feel free to come.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop some deep lore here. So the first track on the Just Streaming label, my track, is actually mixed by Brett.
Yeah.
So if you want to check out his work, you can go listen to it on Spotify or anywhere else you find streaming. And then for RANIERE, I guess just like listen to Mariah Carey or something, right?
Amazing. Okay. I think we're done. We could hang out here for a little bit longer, but for the podcast, oh, yes, we do actually have a podcast happening in the podcast room, which is just behind over here. If you are past boot camper, which I don't think anyone here is, we definitely recommend you to come. Otherwise, feel free to drop by and say hi and all that kind of good stuff. We have Sean in the back who's going to be hosting that. Thank you so much, Sean.
So if you have any questions, I'll be over there. Tell me what you want to learn, because we're going to be giving you courses and helping you learn all the stuff you need. So I need to know what you want to learn.
Amazing. Okay, let's skedaddle. If you have any more questions, we can chill here for a little bit longer if you want to just like hang out. And then we'll be disappearing too. So, yeah.